Hello and welcome. It's December 20th, 2024, and we're going to be talking about songs to be sung in Mania. And now, what does this mean? So, I recently went back to work. I work part time, and I'm finding it harder than I thought because what's happening is working is taking a lot of energy out of me. So, it takes a while to recover. And not only that, when I wake up in the morning, I feel kind of depressed, and it takes a while for that to wear off, and that's on my days off. So I start feeling depressed in the morning when I wake up, and then eventually don't feel so depressed, and I might have to rest. Not only that, when I get home from work, I can barely do anything. I just eat and then sit and watch TV. So it feels quite draining, and I think eventually I'll adapt. But the couple days before that, I was working on some spoken word, and it occurred to me that, in a way, these words could be said and sung by anyone in the state of mania. So they're sort of for the state of mania, they're from the state of mania, or higher energy, or a different perspective of seeing than usual. So, usually songs, like anyone can sing them or people can sing in their car. And even for myself, like I'm writing them now, I'm finding the words, but I'm not even in that state of mania. Not even close. And so part of it feels not like false, but a little false in that right now I'm nowhere near that state, yet I can harvest the words of that state. So in a way, that is a cool thing because I still have access to the fruits of mania, but at the same time, I'm not creating more fruits, which is good because otherwise there's just too much of it. And I guess the hope is that one day I'll be in a state and a mindset and an embodiment to be able to, I don't know if it's perform these or what. Maybe I'm just going to be the writer and somebody else performs them or creates their own something based on them. I'm not sure. But I guess I wonder if I will ever be in that place where I'm genuinely feeling the words that I've accessed in another time. But at the same time, I'm harvesting it from some of the documents that they're not spoken words, so I'm sort of extracting them from the documents, which I can still do. So I can see the lines, but I'm very disconnected from it. So maybe it's about being able to step into those feelings and states. I'm not sure. What was interesting this morning is I also woke up feeling kind of depressed. And I was having trouble sleeping, so I was listening to something on my phone as I fell asleep. So it was kind of beside me in the bed when I woke up. I usually don't leave it. I don't do that usually. It's across the room at least. So I just started watching videos. Well, the first video I came across, and I'd never seen a video like this in my feed, but it was a video of a man named John Batiste, and he was listening to a song by Green Day, and it was his first time hearing the song. So they were playing different songs and checking to see if he knew the song, and then when he didn't know a song, it was a Green Day song, he was sort of improvising and riffing and doing all these cool things on the piano. Like he's basically a genius on the piano. And I don't pretend to know how to describe his level of genius. I would watch videos with him if you want to see. Again, his name's John Batiste. And for this, it was really interesting to me that this man playing the piano, he was basically ecstatic with joy, playing along to this song and riffing and adding in all these creative bits, and it's just genius. And not only that, he's like so joyful. He's smiling, he's just so happy. And how that struck me as well is right now I feel in my life it's like working is a bit challenging after 3 months of not working and then trying to get back into it. Just coming out of depression, which is the opposite of being super joyful. And then so much so that the work almost pulls me back into a depression, which is more like just using up energetic resources. And I worked a couple 8-hour days, and it's just sort of like information overload and social overload. And I'm like majorly an introvert, and I feel like coming out of depression, it makes me still very, very introverted. And so being at work, there's almost less joy knowing that I'm going to be drained. And so it feels kind of fake, like I have to almost fake being happy. But the funny thing is that I'm not faking being happy. I am when I'm at work. But then when I get home and I'm drained, I'm not. So there's like a cost to being around people and working and using energy that I don't seem to have a lot of. So my mind was wondering, like, what is my version of Jon Batiste? Of course, I'm not a piano player, but that's when I realize when I've been in mania at certain times, I feel like myself. I feel like my most joyful self. And that's kind of the equivalent of, being sort of the genius version of myself. It almost takes some kind of genius to really align oneself with who one really is. And now that doesn't have to mean that I or someone else needs to be incredibly skilled at one given thing or one given dimension of life. Like in the example of Jon Batiste, it's music, right? Not only piano, it's music. Like, it's different between like playing piano and learning songs and really understanding music at a fundamental level. Like, I was reading some of the comments and people are saying he is music. He's not separate from it. And so it got me wondering about, creating, say, spoken word and somehow seeing if that connects as something. Maybe it's not myself performing it. Maybe they're just words, almost like music for mania. For people who are in mania or who want to resonate a little bit higher in their own life energy because of it coming from that. And it doesn't take these words. It's just part of it. I'm just wondering, are these songs to be sung in mania? Like, is it a genre of when people are in mania, they actually become able to perform it or perform their own whatever because they heard this, creating a certain genre for a state of consciousness that almost anyone can experience. Mania is part of human consciousness. Even though someone hasn't experienced it before in life, they could through like non-volitional states or through something they take or whatever. And yeah, so it's also interesting how I've never seen a video with Jon Batiste, and those videos aren't usually recommended to me. And I felt quite depressed waking up and realizing I wasn't going to feel depressed the whole day, but it's kind of feeling low to begin with. And then that's what it is that I see. And and watch, and just watching the joy. It makes me feel like it's possible, it's possible. And feeling like the work that I'm doing for a job it's hard to sync back up with after being away from it for a while. And like I said, just feeling like I'm really far away from truly being myself, being me. And I felt quite frustrated about that yesterday. And then watching him inspired me to be like, okay, like just keep at it, keep at building whatever it is I can only build. And then I watched a couple other videos of him, and he has a few songs, maybe more, but I just clicked on a few of his songs, and one of them, it was almost like a special message, because it starts out, it's called Be Who You Are, which is a message, of course, but it starts out with lonely one out there on an eagle's wing. You're bringing something they can't bring and singing something they can't sing. And that's true for all of us, right? And then he goes on to say, I know it's lonely when saying something they ain't heard. Don't want to say a mumbling word, because they'll come for you and you'll get purged. So it's like speaking out, right? But then people who go into mania, they say they're mumbling words, right? Which is what I call spontaneous, vulnerable speech. It's like speaking as we see. It's like improvising with language. So in a similar way that John improvises, and I don't even know if that's the right word, people in mania, they're perceiving the moment of life, and they're the instrument of the words that come through, that happen to come through due to a person's perception. But generally, people don't want to listen. They come for us, and then we get purged. We go to the psych ward or whatever. So in a way, that's why creating a long list of mumbling words that are no longer just mumbling words, but a curated set of words from those mumbles. For me, it's from my particular mumbles from Gaia. I could say, well, it's for me to perform, or maybe somebody else. And if it's me, then maybe other people do their own version of it and do it in mania, have words to say in addition to the words. Because like, can we go from a place of speaking and getting purged, like saying our mumbling words and almost not being able to help ourselves because we just say them, and then they come for us and we get purged, and we may do it again and again. That's part of what I'm feeling, is like, I wonder if I'm running out of energy for this. Like, it came to my mind that there's a possibility that each time there's an iteration of, say, mania, psychosis, depression, whatever amounts that happens in a cycle, it really does take something out of you. It takes something out of me. And you can also think about how with bipolar disorder, they say, well, at each episode you have, like, your illness gets worse. And you also feel like, because I'm always learning and I'm iterating and I'm integrating and I'm doing re-uncovery and self-dialogue, and I'm wondering, though, if it does still take resources. So if a cycle, an iteration of mania, like my bipolar biorhythm goes through a certain cycle, and maybe it's not as intense, like it doesn't go as high into mania, but maybe it's mania over a longer period of time. It takes resources, right? It takes resources and energy biologically and chemically to do that. And so I've made use of some of it creatively and stuff like that. And part of it is to share so that others can do the same in their unique way, or add another tool to their tool belt, if you want to say it like that. So it's worth it, right, to be able to do those things. And then at the same time, it's like, okay, I don't think my illness is getting worse, but I do feel that maybe there's only so many iterations that can happen. And creativity and possibilities come through, but then maybe it's like having 9 lives, like a cat, like they say. Maybe there's sort of like 9 lives in bipolar, where you get these 9 waves. And if you aren't able to really make something of it in those waves, that then starts to feed energy back toward you in new ways, whatever that looks like, whether it be other resources, like say turning creativity into a stream of income, just for example, or say finding some great friendships through the creativity, which I have found a couple resonant people through the creativity, and I found some others before, thankfully. And I have thought also, like, this creativity, it's like to magnetize other like minds. And hopefully one day there's other paths for people to sort of go right into, like, say after having a first episode of mania, like going right into, okay, now what can I build from this? How has my life changed? How's my capacities changed? How has my abilities and my values and the channel of information coming through me, like what is that going to be crafted into? It's like going from a mechanized life to more artful life. And part of me feels that the reason that there's that transformation happening in people is because we are sort of programmed to be so mechanical. So imagine if after one episode it's like, okay, how do I create from this? So in my example, rather than say me needing or feeling the need to write a book on basically bipolar mania and what it might have to offer to the best of my ability at the time, and sharing a bunch of the other context, it would be more like going right into art, or it could be going right into science. But one of the things I wanted to create was the science of, the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices. But right now I'm moving more into the creativity, because I'm just wondering, like, I think I feel so far away from mania, and maybe this will help get me closer, rather than the nitty-gritty of scientific facts that correlate with the consciousness, the conscious experience of mania, except perhaps the language aspect. So the language aspect. And, maybe this is the most important thing to go into in the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices. I think, so this was the book that I gathered a bunch of the information that I could do some of that in, which is good. And what I also wanted to do was create a spoken word based on this. But what I've been doing what I was doing the other day, and I didn't really screen record it. I think I was listening to music again, but I want to share what I wrote. And this is how far I got into this book, page 33. So everything that came before this is up to page 33. So I wrote this here, words to be said, riff off of, ad lib, etc. And I'm kind of glad I had this insight about it, right? It might lift me up to mania, and it might be something to be said in mania. So let's see. This is what I did so far, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do the actual like performing of it. But even if I say it, and say do an audio or something on it, it would be like an invitation for people to build on it, to do their own version. So in a way, if you watch the videos by Batiste, it's quite interesting. And then a documentary based on Collier. What's his? Jacob Collier. Never heard of him, really. I might have heard his name. Didn't know that he is also a musical genius who can play a bunch of instruments. And I'm going to watch the rest of that documentary because I feel like watching really gives insights. But when I was watching another video with John Batiste, he was saying how he did a rendition of Fleur Elise by Beethoven. I believe it's by Beethoven. And he, adds a bunch of improvisation in there. A ton, to the point where at some points you wouldn't recognize the song, but it's still in there. And he made the point that he's like adding in this stuff that didn't exist in the time of Beethoven, whether it's the blues or whatever other genres that he's influenced by, putting them all in there, right? So in that kind of way, this would be similar. Like this would be some manic dotes, some kind of manic words that people could riff off of and build upon. Not saying it's the first, like a Beethoven thing, but it's something like that. Because I could write another 5 books first, or I could do this first, and I think this catches on more. And doing the spoken word on the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices versus trying to write the book. But I can also do the book excuse me, at the same time. So this is what I have so far, and I'm not sure, like, I can write longer words, or longer sentences. And this is actually based on, now that I have it down to 3 sort of books here, this one's about co-creativity. So this is the one that I've been going through and just sort of reading in order to grab the bits. It's like taking all of this and making them into shorter phrases and things like that in order to make it into spoken word type genre. And then I could do the same with the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices. So for example, I could do one spoken word on this, on like perception and attention and learning and cognitive biases and whatever. So I think just skimming is more interesting than trying to write. So let's just say it out loud because I haven't yet. So it starts. Let's go here. Maybe I should make this a bit bigger so I can see. what I'm saying. This is where it starts for this one. And some of this I would definitely edit a bit, but the two main spoken word that I've written already came through in one go, and I didn't really change anything. But that was just writing in a flow based on a topic that I have versus kind of going through and harvesting lines. So this is a little bit a different way of doing it. And so harvesting lines in a book that is just notes, which it's not really in perfect order. Some of these things, this content could be like, it's not really going perfectly in like a linear trajectory, which could be fine. So here it is. Invisible, indivisible, visionary, chirping in the coal mind like a canary. Friendly strangers, dudes with infectious moods. This world contrary, jolly jeers of cheerfulness, crowding out this mental mess, fulfilled with light from inside out. Haphazard interactions, enthusiastic pop-up factions. Dangerous to the status quo, beautiful world set aglow. Meaningful, purposeful, useful function is the primary assumption. Connected up through synchronicity is the only destiny. So I'll gather the best of me and pass the rest to you. I'm hoping that you do the same thing too. Hive mind comes alive, overshadowing the contrived. From stigma to stigmergy, merging with infinity, crazy enough to change the world, charmed with ideas unfurled. Information bombardment embodiment from the adjacent light body sent. Put an end to the narrator, the ego's fabricator. Ask yourself who you can be. Who can you be? Reach up to your wildest possibility. Forget social power games. Go forth from whence you came. There's surplus energy, a fountain of youth exergy. First-person player character, arising from the lay actor. Jumping off the fence, stepping up to the offense. Joining in the game of life, amongst artificial intelligence strife. Look with compassionate eyes, melt away the veil of lies. A curtain of the sick society, disguised as mere propriety. Look in the mirror, steer clear of the insincere. Let unknowns scribe on gray matter, erase areas ascribed for mind chatter. Clear up the working memory, bandwidth for perception, action, harmony. New dimensions open up, mention to those with empty cups. Look around with glee, ascertain uncertainty. Compersion metanoia takes over from paranoia. Get in the flow because it heals. Surf along the quantum fields. Selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. Your limited nature, you need to ditch this. Special messages light the way. Puzzle pieces of a better day. Wisdom selected by nature. Gaia speaks, no need to bait her. Create your own chaotic attractors. Syntropically, what is just for you and she. Lean back and watch your own show, flowering in the I don't know. Spontaneous rapid deprogramming. Human consciousness transforming. Decentralized agency related through vibrancy. Lightning sight cut out the crap. Thunder speech disproves spellbound traps. I'm going to make a note about claps because I noticed how that's kind of related to thunderclaps. Do your personal work until the impersonal works. Inverse and reverse the roles. The powers that be seemingly stole. Read the proverbs Avoid the linguistically absurd. Muster up the currency to change the course of reality. Blah blah repetitive, blah blah iterative. Don't think in terms of identity, as that creates a single entity. The roles you play require skills. You mend reality's ills. Frequency holders, neologism beholders, idea originator, content creator, content creator, cognitive dissonator, don't worry, I'll tell you more later, early adopters of quantum consciousness, blah, 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 we are blessed. So that's related to this first part of this document here. Let's see. So let's see if I can harvest more to go in here. Transformation friendly. So I would say, so some of the lines, just a few of them, are kind of from other people. Transformation friendly magic experience. Let's see here. I want it beside this. So this could be split up into many or a few. So I heard they wanted to make the mental health system towards a transformationally friendly mental health system. That was something I heard Ron Unger and Katie Mottram say, I think. Can't remember. One of them or both of them. And create a manic popular culture. Set of practices, beliefs, and objects. I think I might just add that one. See, I don't know if it's harder to write this while talking and looking or easier. So I haven't really done much writing, but I'm usually doing kind of after the other. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be different. Transformation friendly magic experience. Yeah, like what rhymes with experience. I've never looked up what rhymes with. Like, I don't really like to look things up when I'm doing this, but let's see here. I can always change this last word. Transformation friendly magic. Friendly magic experience transformation. So I've been talking about Laurel Erica, and some of her quotes are in here. I remember when I wrote my other spoken word, I used the word murmuration because of her, so I don't really need to use it again. The goal really would be to have not too many of the spoken word. I'm just wondering about this here. So we have common language. I think I'm just going to take this out of here because I kind of want to say it somewhere. Maybe I stopped here in the document where it gets a little challenging. Okay, so this part I actually wrote out a little bit, which this is based on a book called Swarm Intelligence. It's a really interesting book. And I don't even know if I wrote this. Usually if it is out like this, then I didn't write it. But then at the same time, I don't see a reference. And it looks like something I would write. Kind of like apprehendable envelopment. Apprehendable envelopment. Yeah, so I talk about in the book, James Hayward Rowling Jr. talks about how many creative people were behind the arising of Motown, the sounds, the singers, the hit songs. There were a lot of people behind that, and there were the people who became the singers and the stars. But they pooled their talents and resources. And I feel that that is the sort of thing that one day bipolar people might be able to do. And by doing that, maybe one day there'd be a place for people in Mania to go to explore their creativity without getting kind of mixed up in the world, which isn't creative, right? So it's like trying to be out in a creative, when you're in a super creative state, wandering around and trying to share that. That would have been like somebody from Motown trying to like walk around and sing, even though they didn't have the hit songs yet, and they didn't have the way they worked together to create the whole genre and the whole thing, right? So it feels like that's where we're at with bipolar, is there can be a lot of good stuff coming out of it if we're able to figure that out, right? Because otherwise they come for us and we get purged. And by pooling our talents, maybe that wouldn't happen so much. And what would it be like to design an excite ward, which is kind of a play on psych ward, but excite ward. To be able to gather some of those fruits. If there was something like that, people would likely go there. Like, oh, I'm in a super creative state. I want to go somewhere to gather and figure out this creative energy and make something out of it. But instead, we're like lost in the uncreative world out there, the one that we've been sort of programmed to go around in. And then when we run out of energy, we're kind of in the opposite of a creative state, kind of like used all our creative resources, and then basically they come for us and we're purged, like this song by John Batiste says. So, yeah, the example of being in a full-blown mania and being able to create a song, like go there and there's musicians, and maybe with the right musicians and in that state, a person might be able to create a hit song. And then there's something created from the state of mania, instead of, you started all these projects, but it's like some of them require other people to finish them or bring them about. So if we had those other people, then that would be different. It's kind of like mania. I just see this now, but mania is sort of like, this is a metaphor, but it's sort of like the opposite of dementia. So with dementia or Alzheimer's, I've seen clips where people are able to like get up and dance the way they used to, or have certain skills they still have access to, which is like their embodied cognition, even though they're in later stages of dementia and maybe don't even recognize their own children. You can see some of these videos on YouTube. And so they still have that with them that they were able to do. And maybe they can't do it to the same degree as they once did when they were younger. Now, mania, and so what I'm saying is it's very dependent on, say, the music being played or that person being engaged in that certain way. Otherwise, most of the time, they're maybe living in a home and, doing whatever they do. Hopefully having a comfortable life. And so in mania, it's like the inverse of that. It's this part of us that there's this energy and this creativity that is like a seed that sometimes starts to flower. And all of a sudden, a person is like fully themselves in a totally different way, which could be very foreign to people to know them, right? So it's almost like in dementia, how that the person experiencing dementia may not remember their family. But if a person experiences mania, they may not remember their old self in a way, or they may not want to. And then the people around them might not recognize them as themselves. But the person in that state may or may not feel more themselves than ever. So it's like this other thing, right? Where the brain over time and with age can deteriorate memories to the point where a person doesn't really remember themselves or whatever. But there's this other thing, this other part of the brain that can come online, usually a bit earlier in life though, which all of a sudden a person is totally different. Not from a dementia and point of view, but like the opposite of dementia. It's like another dimension of a person. And to me, it's almost strange that we don't believe that this can happen to people, and that, of course, dementia isn't seen as a good thing. It's not. And then you could say, well, this isn't a very good metaphor because you're saying it's a bad disease, just like everyone is saying. But I feel like it's almost this reaction to not being oneself and trying to figure out who one is. Because like the way we're raised and stuff, we're not really raised to be exactly who we are, doing exactly what we wish to do, to the point that anything else would be like unbelievable, everything other than what we really are. But sometimes we get to see who we really could be. It doesn't have many pathways to get integrated like that as like human potential. Just like people might get a chance to see their loved one who has dementia being like they were before, or at least certain things they were able to do. Or so I think it can be a good thing. But that's just going into this whole thing here. I don't know where that insight came from. Maybe if I'm talking on screen record, I'm likely to have insights rather than see the spoken word, but I don't know. Let's see. And I also, with reading the spoken word that I have so far, it's like, it's kind of exactly what John Batiste is talking about. Like, you can only be who you are. It's kind of a spoken word like that. Yeah, so basically keeping yourself protected. Apprehendable envelopment. Protection from the world's development. Something like that. There's also, insects, intelligent insects that have, say, a queen, like ants. And share the messages of stand in our power, share the messages of the swarm. So, I think I would put the warm and leave the S. Because like a swarm isn't necessarily a good thing, but share messages of the warm. Stand strong. I don't like that. It's like overused, but stand strong. Exit the dorm, as a way of saying, the prison cell or whatever. Or the dorm, which is like you're in university. Now come out. So let's see. Mentor each other. Mentor each other. Is each other one word? I don't even know. No. Mentor each other. Pave the way for another. Something like that. Since this is about co-creativity, for example, the people that had lobotomies made it easier for us today, as it was eventually outlawed. So, outlawed lobotomies. Outlawed lobotomies. One less dichotomy. I don't know if I used dichotomy already. No. One less dichotomy. Now, I don't know if that's the exact perfect use of that word, but we'll get back to that later. I know I've used the word trajectory. So here's a bunch of quotes from the book, which I won't probably use too much from, but it's a great book. I don't think I read all of it yet, but yeah, geniuses always emerge from the leading edge of a swarm of thinkers who think very much like they do, right? So this would also be to find others who think like I do. And I think that's people who go into mania. And then, like I said, maybe from that, someone's able to spring into using these words, or not necessarily the words I'm putting together here, but whatever theirs are, into their genius. Like, I think there could be more people, and there are people who are, say, quote, famous with bipolar diagnosis. But I mean, like, somebody really coming from the creativity of it, like the real raw creativity of it. There could be people that are like that too, but I mean, like, why aren't maybe more of us able to do that? But in a unique way, not from, say, like a diagnosis of a mental illness, but from this creative energy, So let's see. Parallel structures. There's a lot of notes in this document. So I'm pretty sure Carl Jung said grips of collective psychosis. Yeah, I think there already is a mass psychosis. The subtle is censored. I don't know about that one. So there's this thing about parallel structures, which is any form of organization, business, institution, technology, or creative pursuit that exists physically within a totalitarian society, yet morally outside of it. Yeah. When enough parallel structures are created, a second culture or parallel society spontaneously forms and functions as an enclave of freedom and parallel structure. I'd have to find where I got that from. It could also be from swarm intelligence, since it's in the same. See, I already used the word recontextualizing. It's in a line, recontextualize text tough and tightly. You know, to create greatness in the realm of mania. You know, like Hollywood creates greatness, like in quotes. I wrote this 4 years ago, before I knew that Hollywood is Hollywood. I like this word. I put a hyphen here. Intuition. Paying to learn to get in on the movement. Intuition. I'll just put that separate. Intuition. So there's sometimes these main ideas that someone else said, usually. I have a lot of main ideas of my own, but there's some that stick with me as mechanisms. For example, I think this is actually referring to, they say if you do 6 handshakes a day, if you shake hands with 6 people in a day, you've really shook hands with everyone on the planet because of the people they're connected to, etc. I don't remember exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure Veritasium did a video on this. And yeah, so I really like that because it's a way to spread synchronicity. So I think spread synchronicity exponential tech. I already use source code as well. Source code wisdom talkers. Source code wisdom talkers. So something here I don't think this is the line, but I'm just going to put it for now. Hexagon, what the heck? The hexagon is like, the hex is gone, and hexagon, 6 sides, and the 6 handshakes to reach everybody in the world, in a day or in an hour, in a minute. So the video's getting long, so I'm going to start a new one, I think, and go from there. Okay, so I think talking and finding lines is slower, but at the same time it's a different experience. So I won't always do it, but I will keep going for now. I like the word incubate. Okay, let's see if I can go a little faster. I think. See, I found a place to put the reciprocity, and then it's in the document again, but by itself. So I already saw, I kind of like the word reciprocity. Let's see what else I got down here. It's not too far down. It's like little bits. Asymptotic, symbiotic. Okay, oops. We'll just leave it at that. Synchronously organizing systems. I'll just put that separate. Most of it has gone together relatively nicely, but it doesn't have to. Oh yeah, bumblebee effect. Something that I made up with a friend. Bumblebee effect. Somebody said the only thing preventing your own freedom is thinking that others aren't already free. I don't know who said that, but it wasn't me. Invitational language. Oops. So I think I would go with worldview, invitational language. I saw something else here. Okay, so this chapter here, rules and tools, I was starting to, well, this is related to another project that I'm doing, which is the playbook. I was wondering if creating some kind of, so with the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices and how the cognitive and perceptual system seems to change with, say, the physiological phenomenon of enlarged pupils, then, knowing that one is shifted in consciousness, are there some rules one could use in order to, quote, stay? So finding some rules and like brainstorming some rules, not as strict rules, but, say I knew the rules of being in mania and trying to interact with society, then I would keep myself out of trouble. And so for myself, I definitely learned the rules, I think. Like if you touch an electric fence, you definitely know, and you adjust accordingly, and don't try to jump over it unless you can figure out where the off switch is. So, and I'm wondering if that is partly what is this feeling of running out of resources, like running out of being able to get into the energy that allowed this information to come through in the first place, And maybe I'm not supposed to, like maybe that was the purpose of the energy, was to harvest this. So, and I use the example of Jordan Peterson's book, the 12 rules for life, right? I didn't read it. I think I read a little bit, like the first chapter or something. But just this idea of people who experience mania having some ground rules. And I definitely have figured out some for myself, and maybe they're different for each person. So imagine listing 100 ground rules and people being able to figure out which 10 are most valuable to keep in mind in certain states of mind. So can guidelines help us here? Paradoxes of fluxing consciousness. Kind of like that. I don't want the in there. Positivity, bias, generosity. I like that. Oops. You are the redesign of society. Cultural creatives. Heuristics are rules that help us with or play our play to avoid going astray. You know what? I want to actually stick this in here. Kind of indicate when I heard that, and almost to see if others would pick up on it, right? Want to say a mumbling word. Have I used the word absurd? I'm sure I have. Bird is the word. How absurd? That's not really. So I already used it at the end. Avoid the linguistically absurd. Want to say a mumbling word. Oh yeah, the other part that it says here is saying something they ain't heard. Want to say a mumbling word. Well, it's kind of borrowing exactly from it, right? Saying some things you ain't. Now, I think what I would do with this is put it at the very beginning and then probably not use it at all, just because, taking 2 lines, unless it's a direct sort of shout out. Like I said, there are only a few that are really inspired by others, which I would denote. Like the one about crazy enough to change the world. That one it's from a Steve Jobs quote, right? It can also be quite generic sounding, but I was inspired by Steve Jobs, because part of me feels like, they say things that you got to be crazy to change the world, or crazy enough to try to change the world. And then people who go crazy and try to change the world, but in a kind of crazy way, and we're not really taught how to be world changers. It's sort of like fumbling in it, are punished, So hopefully getting to the point where that's not happen. Let's see here. So on this book that I wanted to write about swarm intelligence or co-creativity in general, as like a stepping point into inviting co-creativity between bipolar people, has references to books like Rhetoric for Radicals, and there's a book called Natural High that's quite good. Also, this tit for tat game is interesting when it comes to the rules. Like, don't play tit for tat. So, for example, in the past, I've been in the psych ward, and if, say, something happens from, say, a nurse or someone also staying in the psych ward, and I snap back, they're going to snap back at me, like, most likely, or I'm going to get some kind of punishment. So I don't do that, I be as pleasant as I can to everybody, and that has always worked out really well, because there's going to be people who are struggling in there, of course. It doesn't mean I'm not struggling, but I try not to put that on other people and have a better result from that. Not saying that's always possible for everyone, but to the best of one's ability, doing that if it seems to be a thing that is interesting. Let's see. Yeah, and there's also something I want to research about the working memory. And so people in mania, they're often very truthful, even if what comes out isn't necessarily factual. So for some reason I had an idea. Is there a way to talk to people who are in like a normal state to get them into this truthful state? And that might be a stepping stone to a higher energy state, possibly. Like a psych interview for normal people designed to get them to connect to their adjacent light body. So, this would be like, say one day there are people who, through bipolar, are able to harness the creative energy, really get into their human potential, and hopefully as well be in a state where is the opposite of what I'm describing, where I'm like at work and I'm getting quite drained, which could be a sign that that's not really who I'm meant to be in the long run. And then, but people who are getting really recharged and then are able to pass that on to, quote, normal people. Because I feel that we potentially one day have a lot to offer people who aren't naturally able to tap into these other dimensions of their consciousness and energy. Informationally open. Yeah, so like, think about that. Just as one idea of creating like an interview or questions that would help regular people get into their adjacent light body, that would take quite a bit to do, unless this is where we tap into ChatGPT. Let's just pretend, since we're able to do that. Where's ChatGPT? Let's Let's just put it in as is and see what it says. Designing an adjacent light body interview. A team to explore this. All right, we'll come back in a few minutes.